She was the galaxy's most feared assassin, until a human toddler called her Mama. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. In the shadowed corners of the Terminus station, where even the most hardened criminals kept their heads down and their voices low, a figure cloaked in midnight blue armor moved through the crowds like death itself. Her name was Vex, and she had killed more beings than most species had words for numbers. The child changed everything. Vex had spent 17 standard cycles building her reputation across 42 star systems. She was a Keldari, a species known for their predatory instincts, enhanced reflexes, and complete lack of what other species called mercy. Her kind stood over 7 feet tall, with sleek muscular frames covered in dark scale-like skin that could change color to blend with shadows. Their eyes were large and reflective, capable of seeing in complete darkness, and their hands ended in retractable claws sharp enough to slice through reinforced steel. The Keldari were born hunters, and Vex was the best of them. Her services didn't come cheap. Planetary governors, crime lords, and corporate executives paid fortunes to have her eliminate their problems. She worked alone, trusted no one, and left no witnesses. Her ship, the Silent Death, was equipped with weapons systems that could level a city block and stealth technology that made her invisible to every known scanning system in the galaxy. The job on Outpost 7 Alpha had seemed routine. A weapons dealer named Horvath had stolen something valuable from the Syndicate and needed to be eliminated along with anyone who might have seen what he took. Simple. Clean. The kind of work Vex could do in her sleep. She infiltrated the outpost through the waste disposal systems, moving through the corridors with the silence of a shadow. Her thermal scanners showed 3 life signs in Horvath's quarters, the target and 2 others. Standard precaution was to eliminate all witnesses. Vex disabled the door's security with a small electromagnetic pulse device and slipped inside. Horvath was at his desk, his back to the door, studying something on a holographic display. The other 2 heat signatures were in the adjacent room. She would take Horvath first, quick and silent, then deal with the others. Her blade was in her hand, the monomolecular edge gleaming in the dim light. She crossed the room in 3 swift strides, her claws already extending. Horvath started to turn, his eyes widening as he saw her reflection in the screen, but it was far too late. Her blade found the gap between his 3rd and 4th vertebrae, severing his spinal column instantly. He died without making a sound. Vex retrieved a small data chip from Horvath's pocket, the item her employers wanted recovered, and turned toward the adjacent room. Through the doorway, she could see a woman lying on a bed, clearly dead for several hours already. A victim of Horvath's paranoia, perhaps, or simply wrong place, wrong time. But the 3rd heat signature was moving. She stepped into the room, her eyes adjusting to the even dimmer light, and froze. A child stood beside the bed, no more than 2 or 3 years old by human standards, though Vex had limited experience with human development. The small creature had golden hair that fell in messy curls around a round face streaked with dried tears. Large blue eyes stared up at Vex without fear, only confusion and something that looked like desperate hope. Vex training said to eliminate all witnesses. Her reputation demanded it. Her contract specified it. But something in her neural pathways misfired as she looked at the tiny human. The child was so small, so fragile. Humans were rare in this sector of space, their homeworld being several months of travel away through multiple jump gates. What was a human child doing on a backwater outpost with a low-level weapons dealer? The child took a wobbling step forward, little hands reaching up. Then it spoke, a single word in standard galactic common, pronounced with the uncertain confidence of someone just learning language. Mama. Vex, 3 hearts, the biological marker of her species, all seemed to skip a beat simultaneously. The child thought she was its mother, or perhaps was simply calling out for any motherly figure, having lost the woman on the bed. The logical part of Vex's mind, the part that had kept her alive through hundreds of contracts, screamed at her to complete the mission. But her hand wouldn't move. Her blade stayed at her side. The child took another step, stumbled, and Vex found herself catching the small human before it could fall. The child's weight was almost nothing in her arms, and up close, she could see that it was malnourished, the bones of its small wrists too prominent, the skin pale except for bruises that spoke of rough handling. "Mama," the child said again, and wrapped tiny arms around Vex's neck. Something broke inside the galaxy's most feared assassin. Or perhaps something that had been broken for a very long time suddenly began to heal. She couldn't name the feeling, had no reference for the strange warmth spreading through her chest cavity where her heart resided. The Keldari didn't have strong parental bonds. They laid eggs, guarded them until hatching, then left the young to fend for themselves. Emotion was a weakness her people bred out over generations. But standing in that dim room, holding a creature that should have been her next victim, Vex made a decision that would change the trajectory of her entire existence. She would not kill this child. She would take it with her. The rational part of her mind provided a dozen justifications. The child was human, possibly valuable. She could ransom it back to its people, or sell it to someone who dealt in rare specimens, or simply drop it at the next station and be done with it. But even as she thought these things, Vex knew they were lies. She was keeping the child because something deep in her genetic code, something that transcended her species' cold nature, had been triggered by those two syllables and those trusting eyes. Vex wrapped the child in her cloak, shielding it from the sight of the bodies, and made her way back through the outpost to her ship. The child didn't cry, didn't struggle, just clung to her with surprising strength for something so small. Once aboard the Silent Death, Vex stood in her main cabin, still holding the child, and realized she had absolutely no idea what to do next. She was a killer, not a caretaker. Her ship had weapons, ammunition, stealth systems, and enough destructive capability to wage a small war. It did not have anything suitable for a human toddler. She set the child down carefully on her bunk and watched as it immediately curled into a ball, tiny thumb going to its mouth. When was the last time this small creature had eaten, slept safely, been held without cruelty? Vex accessed her ship's database, searching for information on human children. The data was limited but concerning. Humans required frequent feeding, specific nutrition, constant supervision, and something called emotional bonding that the database described as essential for healthy development. The child appeared to be approximately 2 standard years old, which meant it needed care every few hours, specialized food, and according to one particularly alarming entry, near constant attention. This was impossible. She was an assassin. She had contracts, obligations, enemies who would kill her without hesitation if they sensed weakness. And now she had a human child who looked at her like she hung the stars and called her mama. The child's eyes were closing, exhaustion finally claiming it. Vex found herself sitting on the edge of the bunk, one clawed hand hovering protectively over the small form. She had ended lives without a second thought, had watched entire families perish as collateral damage, had never felt guilt or remorse for any of her actions. But this tiny human had walked through all her defenses with a single word. The next few days were among the strangest of Vex's long life. She diverted to a trading station, using false credentials and a holographic disguise to purchase supplies. Human food, clothing, something called diapers that the merchant assured her were essential. She bought medical supplies, toys, and a data pad loaded with information about human child care. The child, whom Vex learned was named Emma from the identification chip embedded in a bracelet she wore, was surprisingly resilient. She ate the food Vex provided with enthusiasm, though the assassin's first attempts at preparation were clumsy at best. She played with the simple toys, showing them to Vex with bright smiles that did something strange to the Keldari's chest cavity. And every time Vex entered the room, Emma would raise her arms and say that word again. Mama. Vex tried to correct her, tried to explain that she was not the child's mother, that this arrangement was temporary. But Emma either didn't understand or didn't care. To her, Vex was Mama, and that was the end of it. On the 4th day, Vex received a message on her secure channel. Another contract. A high-value target, excellent payment, and it had to be completed within the next 10 days. She read through the details, cross-referenced the target's location and security arrangements, and began planning the operation with the automatic efficiency of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. Then Emma toddled into the room, carrying a stuffed creature that Vex had purchased without really understanding why, and climbed into her lap. The child settled against her chest, content and trusting, and Vex realized the problem immediately. She couldn't leave Emma alone on the ship for the 3 or 4 days the contract would require. She couldn't take a toddler on an assassination mission, and she couldn't simply abandon the child somewhere and hope for the best. For the first time in her career, Vex declined a contract. The response from her handler was immediate and concerned. Vex never declined work. Was she injured? Compromised? The questions came rapid-fire through encrypted channels, and Vex found herself lying, something she rarely did. Equipment malfunction. System upgrades required. She would be available again soon. But would she? Could she? Emma had changed everything. The child needed stability, safety, care. Things that were fundamentally incompatible with the life of an assassin. Vex had spent years perfecting her craft, building her reputation, establishing herself as the best in a very specific and very deadly field. And now a 3-foot-tall human had rendered all of that meaningless. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had faced down warlords, stared into the eyes of beings begging for mercy without flinching, survived situations that would have killed most trained soldiers. And she had been utterly defeated by a toddler who couldn't even pronounce complete sentences. Weeks passed, then months. Vex established a routine that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. She maintained her ship, kept her skills sharp with training simulations, and slowly drained her considerable savings to support them both. Emma grew, learned, flourished under care that Vex provided with increasing competence. The child taught herself to count using Vex ammunition, which the assassin supposed was somewhat concerning but also oddly efficient. She learned colors from the various indicator lights on the ship's control panels. She insisted on helping with everything, from meal preparation to equipment maintenance, her tiny hands passing Vex tools with serious concentration. And slowly, so gradually that Vex almost didn't notice it happening, the child's presence healed something inside her that had been damaged for longer than she could remember. The constant calculation, the perpetual alertness, the cold efficiency that had defined her existence began to thaw. She found herself singing old Keldari hunting songs to help Emma sleep. She made up stories about brave explorers and friendly aliens. She laughed, and sound so foreign from her throat that it startled them both the first time it happened. But the galaxy didn't forget about Vex. And eventually, it came looking. They came at night, ship's time, when Emma was sleeping in the small cabin Vex had converted for her. 6 beings, heavily armed, moving through the docking bay with military precision. Vex security systems alerted her immediately, and she was awake and armed in seconds. She recognized the lead figure immediately. Kravik, a bounty hunter who specialized in tracking other criminals. They had crossed paths twice before, both times ending in tense standoffs that neither could win. He was a Thorian, built like a living tank, with armored hide and strength that exceeded even Keldari standards. Vex activated the external communications, her voice cold and flat. "Turn around and leave, Kravik. You don't want this fight." The bounty hunter's laugh echoed through the comm system. The great Vex, hiding in a docking bay on a third-rate station. How the mighty have fallen. "I'm not here to fight you, assassin. I'm here to collect the bounty." "What bounty?" Vex's claws extended, her body already calculating angles of attack, defensive positions, escape routes. "On you. The syndicate is very disappointed. You took their property and killed one of their dealers. They want both back. The child alive. They're less particular about." Vex's blood went cold. The syndicate. She had forgotten about them in the chaos of adapting to parenthood. Horvath had worked for them, and Emma must have been something they wanted. A hostage, perhaps, or merchandise for their trafficking operations. The thought of what they might have planned for the child made Vex's vision tint red with a rage she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. "The child stays with me," Vex said softly, "and anyone who tries to take her dies. This is your only warning. 6 against 1, and you haven't taken a contract in months. Your skills are rusty, Vex. Be smart. Hand over the kid, and maybe I'll tell the syndicate you died in the fight. You can disappear, start over somewhere they'll never find you." No. The word was absolute, final. There would be no negotiation, no compromise, no scenario where Vex gave up Emma. The child had called her mama, had trusted her with everything a small human could trust, and Vex would burn the galaxy down before she let anyone hurt her. "Then you die here," Kravik said, and the attack began. They breached the ship through 3 different entry points simultaneously. A coordinated assault meant to overwhelm her defenses. But they had made one critical error. They were fighting on Vex territory, in a ship she knew better than her own heartbeat, with modifications and surprises built into every corridor and compartment. The first 2 attackers came through the main airlock and walked directly into a trap. Vex had rigged the corridor with motion sensors linked to shaped charges. The explosion was contained, directional, and utterly lethal. 2 down before they even saw her. The second team came through the cargo bay, trying to flank her position. But Vex had already moved, using the ventilation system to reposition herself above them. She dropped onto the first one, her claws finding the soft spot where neck met shoulder. The Felian died instantly. His partner managed to get a shot off, but Vex was already moving, using the dead body as a shield before launching herself forward. Her blade found his throat before he could fire again. 4 down. 2 to go, plus Kravik. The last 2 came smart, covering each other's positions, using proper military tactics. They had training, probably former soldiers. Vex respected that even as she planned their deaths. She waited until they were halfway down the corridor leading to Emma's cabin, then triggered another surprise. The corridor had been modified so that entire sections could decompress into space. Vex was wearing magnetic boots and had grabbed a secured handhold. The 2 attackers weren't as prepared. The sudden vacuum pulled them off their feet, and Vex shot them both before they could recover, her weapons report silent in the airless corridor. 6 down. 1 to go. Kravik had stayed outside, the coward, letting his team do the dangerous work. But now he had no choice. Vex resealed the corridor and waited, her body positioned between the last entry point and Emma's cabin. The Thorian came through carefully, his massive form filling the doorway, armor gleaming under the ship's emergency lighting. He saw the bodies, saw Vex waiting for him, and actually smiled. There's the assassin I remember. I was starting to think motherhood had made you soft. It's made me dangerous, Vex replied. You're threatening my child. The Syndicate's child, Kravik corrected. Taken as collateral from a human diplomat who thought he could negotiate with them. They've been looking for her for months. There's a substantial reward for her return. Then they'll die disappointed. She's mine now. Kravik laughed, a deep rumbling sound. You can't win, Vex. Even if you kill me, and that's far from certain, the Syndicate will send others. They'll keep coming until they get what they want. You can't protect her forever. Watch me. They fought in that corridor, and it was a battle that would have killed most beings to witness. Kravik's strength was immense, each blow capable of shattering bone. But Vex was faster, her Keldari reflexes allowing her to dodge attacks that should have been impossible to avoid. She used his mass against him, led him into traps, wore him down with 1,000 cuts from her blade. But the Thorian wouldn't fall. He was too strong, too determined, and Vex could feel herself tiring. It had been months since her last real combat, and her body wasn't as sharp as it had once been. A glancing blow from Kravik's armored fist sent her sliding across the floor, her weapon skittering away. The bounty hunter advanced, confident now, sure of his victory. He raised his weapon, aiming at Vex's head, and began to squeeze the trigger. Then Emma screamed. The sound was piercing, terrified, the cry of a child who had been woken by violence and didn't understand what was happening. But it was also the sound that triggered something primal in Vex. Every protective instinct, every bit of fierce maternal rage that had been building for months, exploded outward in a surge of adrenaline that pushed her far beyond normal Keldari capabilities. She moved faster than she had ever moved before, faster than should have been possible. Her hand found a piece of broken deck plating, and she hurled it with all her strength. The improvised projectile caught Kravik in the throat, not enough to kill his armored hide, but enough to stagger him, to make him miss his shot. Vex was on him before he could recover. She couldn't match his strength, so she didn't try. Instead, she went for the gaps in his armor, the weak points that every species had. Her claws found his eyes, blinding him. Her blade found the joints in his armor, the spaces where movement required flexibility. She was relentless, vicious, fighting with a ferocity that transcended training or skill. It was the fury of a mother protecting her young. When it was over, Vex stood over Kravik's body, breathing hard, covered in blood that wasn't hers. Emma was still crying, the sound cutting through the ringing in her ears. Vex stumbled to the child's cabin, her body finally registering the damage it had taken. Emma was standing in her bed, tears streaming down her face, arms reaching out. "Mama," she sobbed. "Mama scared." Vex gathered the child into her arms, holding her close, feeling the small body shake with fear and relief. "I'm here," she whispered, the words coming easier now. "I'm here, little one. You're safe. I'll always keep you safe." But even as she comforted Emma, Vex's mind was already working through the implications. Kravik had been right about one thing. The Syndicate would send others. They knew where she was now, knew she had the child they wanted. This station wasn't safe. Nowhere in this sector would be safe. She needed help. And Vex had spent her entire career making sure she never needed anyone. There was one option. One person who might have the resources and the motivation to help her. A human named Marcus Dean, a former military officer who now ran a security consulting firm that was really a front for mercenary operations. Vex had been hired to kill him once, 3 years ago, but had declined the contract after researching her target. Marcus ran his operations with honor, protected civilians, and had a reputation for keeping his word. More importantly, he was human. He would understand what Emma needed in ways that Vex, for all her determination, never could. Making contact was risky. It meant revealing her location, admitting weakness, asking for help from someone who had every reason to hate her profession. But for Emma, Vex would risk anything. She sent the message through heavily encrypted channels, not knowing if Marcus would even respond. The message was simple. "I have a human child who needs protection. The Syndicate wants her. I killed 7 of theirs to keep her safe. I will kill 700 more if I have to. But I need help. Will you meet with me?" The response came 6 hours later, faster than Vex had dared hope. Coordinates for a neutral station, a time, and a simple promise. "Come alone with the child. If this is a trap, you'll regret it. If it's genuine, we'll talk." Vex took Emma and left immediately, abandoning most of her possessions, taking only what they needed and could carry. The Silent Death was compromised now, tracked by the Syndicate. She would have to acquire another ship eventually, but for now, speed mattered more than comfort. The meeting station was in neutral territory, a place where multiple species' laws overlapped in ways that made violence complicated and expensive. Marcus had chosen well. Vex arrived early, scouted the location, identified exits and potential threats. She was holding Emma, who was sleepy and cranky from the rushed journey, when Marcus finally appeared. He was tall for a human, built lean and strong, with dark hair starting to gray at the temples and eyes that missed nothing. He looked at Vex, then at Emma, and something in his expression shifted from suspicion to understanding. "That's the diplomat's daughter," he said quietly. "Catherine Walker's child. We've been looking for her for 8 months." Catherine was the woman on the bed, Vex said, adjusting her hold on Emma. "Dead when I arrived. The weapons dealer had her." "Horvath." Marcus nodded slowly. "We suspected he was involved in the kidnapping, but we could never prove it." Catherine was negotiating a trade agreement when Emma was taken. She tracked her daughter to that outpost and went alone to retrieve her. She sent one message saying she'd found Emma, and then nothing. "She died getting to her daughter," Vex said. "I arrived too late to save her. But I could save Emma. By taking her yourself?" Marcus's tone was careful, not quite accusatory, but definitely questioning. Vex met his eyes directly. "I am Keldari. We do not have maternal instincts. We do not form emotional bonds with young. But when this child called me Mama, something in my genetic code rewrote itself. I would die before I let anyone harm her." Marcus studied her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "I believe you. The question is, what happens now?" "Emma has family back on Earth. Grandparents who have been grieving for 8 months. They have rights." Emma stirred in Vex's arms, waking up, and immediately looked around for the familiar face. When she saw Marcus, a stranger, she buried her face against Vex's chest and made a small distressed sound. "Mama," she said, holding on tighter. The effect on Marcus was visible. His expression softened, and Vex saw understanding and something like sympathy cross his features. "You've bonded with her," he said. "And she with you." "I know I have no legal claim," Vex said, and the words were harder than she expected. "I know she should be with her own kind. But I love her. I did not know I was capable of love until she came into my life, and now I cannot imagine existing without her." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something Vex didn't expect. "Emma's grandparents are good people. They've been desperate to find her, mourning both their daughter and granddaughter. But they're also realistic. They know Emma has been through trauma. They know she's been gone for months, in circumstances they can't fully understand." "What are you suggesting?" Vex asked carefully. "I'm suggesting that maybe there's a solution that serves Emma's best interests. You love her, that's clear. But you're also an assassin with enemies and a price on your head. That's no life for a child. But what if you could change that? What if you could use your skills for something better?" Vex's eyes narrowed. "You want me to work for you? I want you to have the option to work for me. My organization protects people, stops threats, handles situations that fall through the cracks of normal law enforcement. We operate in the gray areas, yes, but we do it with honor. We don't kill innocents. We don't traffic in cruelty. And we pay well enough that you could provide Emma with a stable life." "And her grandparents?" Vex's hearts were beating faster. Was this possible? Could she actually keep Emma? Would be part of her life? Marcus said. Regular visits, communication, maintaining that connection to her human heritage and her mother's memory. "But if they agree, and I think they will once I explain the situation, you could be her legal guardian. The one who raises her day to day. Her mama, as she calls you. Why would you do this for me?" Vex asked. "You know what I am. What I've done." Marcus's smile was sad. "Because I've spent 8 months watching Emma's grandfather cry himself to sleep every night, knowing his family was destroyed and there was nothing he could do. Because I see how that child holds on to you like you're her whole world. Because sometimes the right thing to do isn't the simple thing, and Emma has already lost her mother. She shouldn't have to lose you too." The proposal was more than Vex had dared hope for. But there was still one problem. "The syndicate won't stop looking for her," she said. "They see her as property, leverage. While she's alive, she'll always be a target. Then we make sure they understand that taking her is impossible," Marcus said, and his voice carried the steel of someone who had fought battles and won. "We publicize her location, surround her with protection, make it clear that any attempt to take her will result in overwhelming retaliation. The syndicate deals in profit margins. We make the cost of pursuing Emma far exceed any possible gain." It was a plan. Not a perfect plan, but better than Vex could have developed alone. And it offered something she had thought impossible, a future where she could keep Emma and give her the life she deserved. They worked out the details over the next several days. Marcus contacted Emma's grandparents, explained the situation with careful diplomacy, and after a tearful video call where they saw their granddaughter alive and laughing, they agreed to the arrangement. They would visit, be part of Emma's life, but Vex would be her primary guardian. The syndicate problem required a more direct solution. Marcus's organization launched a coordinated strike against their trafficking operations, freeing dozens of captives and exposing their activities to galactic authorities. The message was clear: Emma was off limits, and pursuing her would cost them far more than she was worth. When a syndicate team tried to attack anyway, they were met with overwhelming force. After losing 30 operatives in a single night, the syndicate leadership decided that one human child wasn't worth destroying their entire organization. Vex joined Marcus's team officially, bringing skills that proved invaluable for their rescue operations. She was good at her work, better than she had been as an assassin, because now she was saving lives instead of ending them. And every night, she came home to Emma, who was growing into a bright, curious child who knew she was loved by a 7-foot-tall alien who had chosen her over everything else. Emma's grandparents visited regularly, and Vex made sure the child knew about her mother, about her human heritage, about the family that loved her. The visits were sometimes painful, reminders of loss, but they were also healing. Emma thrived with the stability, the love, the knowledge that she belonged. As Emma grew older, she began to understand that her situation was unusual, that most children weren't raised by retired alien assassins, that most families didn't include mercenary operatives as honorary aunts and uncles, that most mothers didn't have retractable claws and could blend into shadows. When she was 6 years old, Emma asked the question Vex had been dreading. "Mama, why don't I look like you?" They were in their quarters on the station that Marcus's organization called home, a comfortable space that Vex had decorated with help from Emma's very definite opinions about colors and furniture. Vex set down the data pad she had been reading and pulled Emma into her lap, careful, as always, of her claws. "Because you're human, and I'm Keldari," Vex explained gently. "We're different species. You know this, little one. We've talked about it before." "I know," Emma said, her small face serious. "But my friend Tara says that mothers and children are supposed to look the same. She says her mom is human like her, and her baby brother looks like them both. So why are we different?" Vex felt her heart constrict. This was the moment she had known would come, but she still wasn't prepared for it. "Because I didn't give birth to you, Emma. Your birth mother was a human named Catherine. She loved you very much, and she died trying to save you." Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then she said, "But you're still my mama, right?" "Always," Vex said firmly. "Your mother gave you life, and that's a precious gift. But I choose you every single day. I chose you when I could have walked away. I chose you when staying meant giving up everything I knew. I chose you when people tried to take you from me. Biology doesn't make a family, Emma. Love does. Choice does. And I choose you. I choose you too, Mama," Emma said, wrapping her arms around Vex's neck in the way that still melted every defense the former assassin had. "I'm glad you found me." "Me too, little one. Me too." The years passed, and Emma grew from a toddler into a child, then into a teenager. She inherited her mother's intelligence and her grandmother's determination, and she learned things from Vex that no other human child could claim. She could move silently through any environment, could assess threats with a glance, could speak 7 languages fluently by the time she was 12. But she also learned compassion from watching Vex work to save others. She learned that strength meant protecting the weak, not dominating them. She learned that the past didn't define the future, that people could change, that love could happen in the most unexpected ways. When Emma was 16, she asked Vex to teach her to fight properly. Not the basic self-defense they had been working on for years, but the real skills. Vex had been expecting this conversation and dreading it in equal measure. "You don't need to learn what I know," Vex said carefully. "You're not going to be an assassin, Emma." "I don't want to be an assassin," Emma replied. "But I want to be able to protect myself. Protect others. You do that now, right? You use your skills to help people. I want to do that too." "It's dangerous," Vex said. "You could get hurt. Killed." Emma's smile was gentle, so like her mother's from the few images they had. "Mama, I'm the daughter of a diplomat who was murdered, raised by a former assassin, and living in a mercenary compound. Danger is already my normal. At least let me be prepared for it." Vex couldn't argue with that logic. So she taught Emma, carefully, emphasizing defense over offense, control over aggression. She taught her to read situations, to avoid fights when possible, to end them quickly when necessary. And she watched with pride and terror as Emma proved to be a quick study, fast and clever and fearless in ways that reminded Vex of herself at that age. When Emma turned 18, Marcus offered her a position with the organization. Not in the field, not yet, but working in intelligence analysis and coordination. Emma accepted, and Vex tried not to hover too obviously as her daughter began her career. The first time Emma went on an actual mission, Vex nearly wore a hole in the deck plating from pacing. Marcus had to physically stop her from following the team, reminding her that Emma was well-trained, well-protected, and needed to prove herself without her mother looming over her shoulder. Emma came back safe, successful, glowing with the satisfaction of a job well done. She had helped rescue a group of children who had been kidnapped for ransom, using her analysis skills to locate them and her language abilities to calm them down once they were free. "I get it now," Emma told Vex that night. "Why you do this work. The look on those kids' faces when they realized they were safe, that their parents were coming for them. That's worth every risk." Vex pulled her daughter close. This young woman who had somehow grown up when she wasn't looking. "Just promise me you'll be careful," she said. "Promise me you'll come home." "I promise, Mama. Always." Time continued its march, as it always did. Emma grew into a formidable operative in her own right, though her specialty was rescue and protection rather than combat. She fell in love with a young man who worked in the station's medical bay, a gentle soul who saw past the unusual family situation and loved her for who she was. They married in a ceremony that brought together humans, Keldari, and a dozen other species. all there to celebrate the young woman who had brought so many of them together. Vex stood beside Emma during the ceremony, and when they reached the part where family was supposed to give the bride away, Emma looked at her with tears in her eyes and said, "My mama gives me her blessing." The words were beautiful, traditional, and absolutely acceptable. But Emma leaned close and whispered, "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for being my mama when you didn't have to be." Vex had faced down assassins, crime lords, and the most dangerous beings in the galaxy without flinching. But her daughter's words broke her in the best possible way, and she cried tears she didn't know she was capable of producing. "Thank you for calling me mama," Vex whispered back. "Thank you for teaching me how to love." Years later, when Emma had children of her own, Vex watched her daughter become a mother and marveled at the full circle they had traveled. Emma's children, half-human hybrids with their father's people, called Vex grandmother in a dozen languages, and she spoiled them shamelessly in ways she would never have imagined possible in her old life. She told them stories about their mother as a toddler, about the day a tiny human had changed the life of the galaxy's most feared assassin with a single word. She taught them to be strong but kind, dangerous but compassionate, always ready to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And sometimes, late at night when the station was quiet, Vex would think back to that moment in Horvath's quarters. The decision that had changed everything. The choice between following orders and following her heart. She had been the galaxy's most feared assassin. She had killed without remorse, lived without connection, existed without purpose beyond the next contract. She had been empty, though she hadn't known it at the time. She had been going through the motions of life without actually living. Then a human toddler had called her mama, and everything had changed. Marcus, now an old man but still sharp, visited often. One evening they sat together watching Emma play with her children in the station's common area, and he said quietly, "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were one of the most dangerous beings I'd ever encountered." "I was," Vex replied. "You still are," Marcus corrected with a smile. "But now you're dangerous in defense of something rather than just for profit. That makes you even more formidable." Vex watched Emma swing her youngest child into the air, the little one shrieking with laughter. "She would kill anyone who threatened this," she said simply. "Anyone who tried to harm my family would learn exactly how dangerous I can be." "I know," Marcus said. "That's what makes you a good mother. That fierce, absolute protection. Emma is lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one," Vex said softly. "I had killed so many people, destroyed so many lives, and I thought that was all I was good for. Then Emma gave me a chance to build instead of destroy, to protect instead of kill, to love instead of just survive." "She saved you," Marcus said. "We saved each other," Vex corrected. "I gave her a mother when she had lost hers. She gave me a purpose when I had none. That's what family does, isn't it? Saves each other over and over again." They sat in comfortable silence, two old warriors who had found peace in unexpected places. Emma looked over and saw them watching, and her smile could have lit up entire planets. She waved, and Vex waved back, her clawed hand moving with the unconscious grace of someone who had learned gentleness late in life, but learned it thoroughly. Later that night, after Emma and her family had gone home and the station had settled into its night cycle, Vex stood in her quarters looking at the collection of memories that decorated the walls. Pictures of Emma at every age, from that first photograph where she was 3 years old and absolutely filthy, to her graduation, to her wedding, to the birth of each of her children. Awards and certificates documenting missions where they had saved lives together. Drawings that Emma had made as a child, carefully preserved behind protective screens. Her old life had no such mementos. The silent death had been sterile, functional, empty. She had owned nothing she couldn't carry, formed no attachments she couldn't walk away from, left no mark on the universe beyond the bodies in her wake. Now her walls were covered with evidence of love, of family, of a life that mattered. Her communication console chimed softly, and Vex activated it to find a message from Emma. Just 4 words and an image. The image was of Emma's oldest daughter, fast asleep, clutching a stuffed toy. The words were simple, but meant everything. "She called me Mama today." Vex felt her heart swell with an emotion she had learned to name over the years. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy at the continuation of the cycle, at knowing that Emma had experienced what Vex had felt all those years ago. The moment when a child's trust transformed everything. She sent back a simple response. Then you understand. Nothing in the universe is more precious than that word. The reply came quickly. I understand, Mama. I understand everything now. Thank you for showing me. Vex saved the message, adding it to the collection of memories, and looked around her quarters one more time. This was her life now. Not empty corridors and weapon lockers, but photographs and children's artwork. Not contracts and kill counts, but family dinners and bedtime stories. Not feared and alone, but loved and surrounded by people who chose her just as she had chosen them. She had been the galaxy's most feared assassin, and that had meant nothing. Now she was Mama, and that meant everything. The next day brought new challenges, as all days did. A distress call from a colony world, reports of missing children, possible trafficking ring. Marcus assembled a team, and Vex prepared her equipment with the same efficiency she had always possessed. But now there was a difference. Now she was fighting for something rather than just fighting. Emma joined the briefing, bringing her analysis of the situation, and as they worked through the rescue plan, Vex saw herself reflected in her daughter. The competence, the determination, the absolute refusal to let innocence suffer if there was anything she could do to prevent it. We'll get those children home, Emma said firmly, and it wasn't bravado or wishful thinking. It was a statement of fact from someone who had been trained by the best and inherited a mother's fierce protectiveness. The mission was dangerous, complex, and ultimately successful. They extracted 14 children from a facility that was supposed to be impregnable, and they did it with minimal casualties to the traffickers because Vex had taught her team the difference between necessary violence and cruelty. They fought only as much as they had to, protected the children first and always, and made sure every scared child knew they were safe. One little girl, maybe 4 years old, reminded Vex so much of Emma at that age that it hurt. She was crying, terrified, reaching for anyone who might help. Vex knelt down, made herself as small and non-threatening as a 7-foot Keldari could manage, and spoke softly in the child's language. You're safe now. We're taking you home to your family. The little girl looked at her with huge eyes, taking in the alien features, the claws, the armor. Then she did something that made Vex's heart skip beats. She reached out her small hands and said a word in her own language that Vex's translator interpreted simply. Mama. Not the same, not exactly. The child was scared and seeking comfort from any maternal figure. But Vex understood in that moment that she had come full circle. She had been saved by a child calling her Mama, and now she was saving children who might do the same for someone else. She gathered the little girl carefully, shielding her from the sight of the facility they were escaping, and carried her to the transport where Emma was coordinating the evacuation. Her daughter saw the child, saw the expression on Vex's face, and understood immediately. She smiled that gentle smile she had inherited from her birth mother and learned to use from the Keldari who raised her. Some things transcend species, she said quietly. Some words mean the same thing everywhere. Mama means protection, Vex agreed. Safety. Love. It means someone who will fight the entire galaxy to keep you safe. That's what you taught me, Emma said. That's what you showed me every single day. The little girl was reunited with her family within hours, and Vex watched as parents who had thought their child was lost forever held her and wept with relief. She saw the way the little girl clung to them, saw the moment when the fear faded and was replaced with the security of being home. That could have been Emma, Vex thought. If I had made a different choice that day, if I had followed my training and eliminated the witness, this is what the universe would have lost. Not just one child, but all the ripples that child created. Emma's husband, who might never have found love. Emma's children, who would never exist. All the people Emma had saved over the years, who would have died without her intervention. One choice. One moment of seeing a child and choosing to protect instead of kill. That was all it had taken to change everything. Marcus found her standing at the observation port, watching the stars. You did good work today, he said. We all did, Vex replied. But you especially. I saw how you handled that little girl. Still got the touch. Vex's mandibles clicked in what humans had learned to recognize as a Keldari smile. Some skills you never forget. How to comfort a scared child. How to make them feel safe even when the universe has been cruel. Emma taught me that. I think you taught each other, Marcus said. That's how the best relationships work. They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Then Marcus said something he had clearly been working up to. I'm retiring next year. For real this time. I've been doing this for 43 years, and I'm tired. The organization needs new leadership. You're offering it to Emma? Vex said. It wasn't a question. I'm offering it to both of you. Co-directors. Emma has the strategy and diplomacy skills. You have the tactical expertise. Together, you'd be formidable. Marcus paused. Also, it would mean you could write your own schedules. Spend more time with those grandchildren. Vex considered this. She had never imagined herself in a leadership role, had always worked alone or as part of someone else's operation. But the idea of building something with Emma, of shaping an organization that protected people the way they both believed in, that appealed to her. I'll discuss it with Emma, she said finally. It's her future too. She should have equal say. Of course, Marcus agreed. That's why I'm asking both of you. The conversation with Emma happened that same evening, over dinner in the family quarters where Emma's husband was managing to convince their youngest that vegetables were actually food. Emma listened to the proposal, glanced at Vex, and then smiled. We'd be good at it, she said simply. And we could do a lot of good. Make sure the organization stays true to what it should be, protection not profit. You're sure? Vex asked. It's a big responsibility. It would mean less field work, more administration. Mama, Emma said patiently, I'm 32 years old and I have 3 children. I was already planning to transition to more advisory roles. This way, I get to do it with you. We get to build something together. How is that even a question? Because I want you to choose this for the right reasons, Vex said. Not because I'm your mother or because you think it's what I want. Your life is yours, Emma. Always. Emma's eyes were suspiciously bright. And that right there is why we should do this. Because you still check to make sure I'm making my own choices. Because you still see me as a person with agency, not just your daughter. That's the kind of leadership this organization needs. So that's a yes? Vex asked, allowing herself to hope. That's a yes, Emma confirmed. On one condition. What condition? You teach my kids those Keldari hunting songs you used to sing to me. They should know where their grandmother comes from, the traditions that shaped you. Vex felt warmth spread through her chest cavity where her hearts beat in perfect synchronization. Deal, she said softly. I'll teach them everything I know. The songs, the stories, the skills. All of it. And I'll teach them about their human heritage, Emma added. About Catherine, about Earth, about where half their DNA comes from. They should know all their roots. They're lucky, Vex said. They get to grow up knowing they come from everywhere. That family isn't about matching DNA. It's about choosing each other every day. Just like you taught me, Emma said. That night, after Emma's family had gone home and Vex was alone with her thoughts, she recorded a message. Not for anyone specific, just for the archives. A record of her journey, her transformation, the truth of how the galaxy's most feared assassin had become someone's mama. My name is Vex, she began, speaking into the recorder in her native Keldari tongue. For 17 standard cycles, I was a killer. I ended lives without remorse, took contracts without question, and existed without purpose beyond my next target. I was very good at what I did. The best, by most accounts. Then I met a child who changed everything. A human toddler who had lost her mother and was in terrible danger. My orders were to eliminate all witnesses. Standard procedure for my profession. But when she looked at me and called me Mama, something in my neural pathways rewired itself. I chose her over my career, my reputation, everything I had built. And she saved me in return. I'm recording this because I want there to be a record somewhere of what happened. A testament to the fact that people can change, that love can happen in the most impossible circumstances, that family isn't about genetics or species or any of the things the galaxy says it should be about. I was a killer who learned to be a mother. I was empty and didn't know it until a small human filled all the spaces I didn't know I had. And now, decades later, I have a daughter who leads with compassion, grandchildren who call me by name and actually mean it, and a legacy that isn't measured in bodies but in lives saved and children protected. If there's anyone out there who thinks they're beyond redemption, who believes they've done too much harm to ever be anything else, I want them to hear this story. I want them to know that I had blood on my hands from hundreds of kills, and I still became someone's mama. I still learned to love. I still found purpose beyond destruction. One choice. That's all it takes. One moment where you choose differently than you've chosen before. One instant where you listen to the voice saying there might be another way. For me, that moment came when a child trusted me. When Emma reached out her tiny hands and said that word, Mama, and gave me a chance to be something more than what I had always been. I took that chance. It was the best decision I ever made. Vex paused, collecting her thoughts, then continued. To Emma, if you ever hear this, thank you. Thank you for choosing me just as much as I chose you. Thank you for teaching me that family is built through love and dedication, not just genetic inheritance. Thank you for being patient while I learned how to be a mother, for forgiving my mistakes, for growing into the remarkable person you are today. You are my greatest achievement. Not the contracts I completed or the reputation I built, but you. The fact that you exist, that you're kind and strong and fierce and gentle all at once. The fact that you use the skills I taught you to protect others, not to harm them. The fact that you're raising children who know what it means to be loved unconditionally. I was the galaxy's most feared assassin. Now I'm just your mama, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the universe. She ended the recording and saved it to the family archives, where someday Emma's children and their children after them might find it and understand the strange, wonderful history of their family. The years continued to flow like water through open hands, bringing changes and challenges and joys. Vex and Emma took over leadership of the organization, reshaping it into something even more effective and principled. They rescued thousands over the years, broke up trafficking rings, stopped conflicts before they could escalate, and protected those who couldn't protect themselves. Emma's children grew, and Vex taught them everything she knew. Not just the combat skills, though those came too, but the important lessons. How to assess a situation without jumping to conclusions. How to offer trust without being foolish. How to be dangerous when necessary, but choose peace when possible. How to love fiercely and protect absolutely. When Emma's oldest daughter, who was named Catherine after the grandmother she had never met, turned 5 years old, she came to Vex with a question. Grandmama, she said, using the title that all Emma's children used for Vex. Why do you look different than Mama? It was the same question Emma had asked decades earlier, and Vex gave the same answer, adapted for a new generation. Because I'm Keldari and your mother is human. We're different species, different worlds, different everything. But family isn't about looking the same. It's about choosing each other. Did you choose Mama? Catherine asked, curious in the way that young children were. I did, Vex confirmed. When she was very small, even smaller than you, I had to make a choice. I could walk away and leave her alone, or I could protect her and become her mama. I chose to protect her. Best choice I ever made. Because you loved her? Catherine pressed. Vex paused, thinking about how to explain something that was both simple and infinitely complex. I didn't love her at first, she admitted. I didn't know how to love. But she taught me. Every day she was patient with me while I learned how to be a mother. She trusted me even when I didn't trust myself. And slowly, I learned what love means. Now I love your mother more than anything in the universe, except possibly you and your siblings. Catherine beamed at that, then asked with the blunt honesty of childhood, will you teach me to be scary like you? So I can protect people too? Vex's mandibles clicked in amusement. You're 5 years old. You have plenty of time before you need to be scary. For now, just be a child. Play, learn, grow. The scary can come later if you choose it. But you'll teach me when I'm ready? Catherine persisted. If your mother agrees, and you still want to learn when you're older, then yes. I'll teach you everything I know. How to protect yourself and others. How to be strong without being cruel. How to use fear as a tool, but never a weapon against innocence. The child seemed satisfied with that and ran off to play, leaving Vex smiling at the endless curiosity of the young. Emma appeared in the doorway, having apparently heard the whole conversation. She's so much like you, Emma said, sitting down beside Vex. That absolute determination, that focus. I see you in her all the time. She's fierce, Vex agreed. All your children are. They get that from you. They get it from both of us, Emma corrected. They get your strength and my diplomacy, your tactical mind and my strategic thinking, your ability to end threats and my ability to prevent them. They're the best of both of us. They're going to change the galaxy, Vex predicted. These children who know that family transcends species, that love matters more than genetics, that choosing each other is the most powerful bond there is. They'll teach that to others, and slowly, things will change. You really believe that? Emma asked. I have to, Vex said simply. Because if one Keldari assassin can learn to love a human child, then anything is possible. If I can change, the galaxy can change. They sat together in comfortable silence, two mothers watching the next generation play and learn and grow. Outside the observation port, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, and somewhere in the vast darkness, there were children who needed saving and families that needed protection. But for this moment, there was peace. There was family. There was love. And there was a former assassin who had learned that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't a weapon or a reputation or perfect combat skills. It was a toddler's trust and a single word. Mama. As the years rolled forward, Vex found herself settling into a role she had never anticipated. The matriarch of a sprawling, unconventional family. Emma's children grew and had children of their own, and the family tree that hung on Vex's wall became more complex with each generation. Humans, Keldari, and half a dozen other species all connected through bonds of choice rather than blood. The organization that Vex and Emma led together became legendary in certain circles. They never took the high-profile jobs, never sought fame or recognition, but word spread anyway. If you had a missing child, if you had a trafficking problem, if you needed someone rescued from an impossible situation, you went to them. They didn't work for money, though they charged enough to keep operations running. They worked because it mattered. Because every child they saved could be another Emma. Every parent they reunited with their young could be given the chance Vex had been given. Every small life protected rippled outward in ways no one could fully measure. On the 50th anniversary of the day Vex had found Emma, the family threw a celebration. 3 generations gathered in the station's largest common area, and Vex looked around at the crowd and marveled at what had grown from one impulsive decision. Emma stood to make a speech, her hair now showing threads of gray. Her children and grandchildren gathered around her. She talked about family, about choice, about the unlikely bond between a human child and a Keldari assassin. She talked about love that transcended every difference and proved that the galaxy was smaller and more connected than anyone realized. But most of all, Emma said, looking directly at Vex, I want to thank my mama, who took a broken, terrified child and gave her safety, who learned how to love when her entire species said it was impossible, who taught me that being fierce meant protecting others, not hurting them, who showed me every single day that family is what we make it. The crowd applauded, but Vex barely heard it. She was looking at Emma, at this woman who had started as a tiny toddler calling out for comfort and had grown into someone magnificent. Someone who led with wisdom, loved with her whole heart, and raised children who would make the galaxy better. Emma crossed the room and embraced her, and Vex held her daughter close, marveling at how time changed everything. The small child who had barely reached her waist was now almost as tall as she was. The scared toddler had become a confident leader. The little girl who had called her mama had become a mother and grandmother herself. I'm proud of you, Vex whispered. So proud. You became everything I hoped for, and so much more. I became who you taught me to be, Emma whispered back. Everything good in me, I learned from you. Catherine, Emma's oldest daughter and now a grown woman with children of her own, approached them with a small box. Grandmama, she said, using the old title with affection. We made you something. Inside the box was a pendant, custom-made, beautiful in its simplicity. It showed a Keldari figure holding a small human child, carved in precious metal with exquisite detail. On the back, an inscription in both Keldari and Standard read, Family is choice. Love is action. One word changed everything. Vex's vision blurred, and she realized she was crying. Even after all these years, after all these experiences, the depth of emotion still surprised her sometimes. Thank you, she managed to say. All of you. For choosing me just as I chose you. For teaching me what family really means. The celebration continued around them, but Vex stood at the center of it all, wearing her new pendant, surrounded by the family she had built through love and choice and stubborn determination. She thought about the old Vex, the assassin who had existed in shadows and dealt only in death. That being felt like a stranger now, someone she had once been but could barely recognize. This was who she was meant to be all along. Not a killer, but a protector. Not alone, but surrounded by love. Not feared, but cherished. Late that night, after the celebration had wound down and most of the family had gone to their own quarters, Vex found herself in the old observation room where she had spent so many nights over the years. Emma joined her, as she so often did, and they stood together looking at the stars. "Do you ever regret it?" Emma asked quietly. "Giving up your old life? You were at the top of your profession. You had wealth, reputation, power. You gave all of that up for a child you didn't know." "Never," Vex said without hesitation. "Not once, not even for a moment. That life was empty, Emma. I didn't know it at the time, but I was just going through motions, existing without living. You gave me purpose. You gave me love. You gave me a reason to be better than what I was." "I was just a scared child," Emma said. "You were everything," Vex corrected. "You were the chance to choose differently, to be something more. You were proof that people can change, that love can happen anywhere, that family is what we make it. You were my salvation, Emma, whether you knew it or not." They stood in silence for a while. Then Emma said, "My grandchildren ask me sometimes why I let you teach them combat skills. Why I'm not worried that they'll become violent or dangerous." "What do you tell them?" Vex asked, curious. "I tell them that you're the most dangerous person I know and also the most gentle. That you have the capacity for terrible violence, but choose peace whenever possible. That you taught me the difference between power and cruelty, between strength and bullying. That knowing how to protect others is different than knowing how to hurt them." Emma paused. "I tell them that if they grow up to be half the person you are, I'll be proud." Vex felt her heart swell with emotion. "You give me too much credit." "I give you exactly the credit you deserve," Emma said firmly. "Mama, you took a profession built on death and transformed it into salvation. You took skills designed to kill and used them to protect. You took a heart that your species said didn't exist and made it big enough to hold an entire family. That's not something small. That's extraordinary. It's love," Vex said simply. "Love makes everything possible." "Then you're proof of that," Emma said. "Because you loved me when you didn't have to. When everything in your training said not to. You loved me anyway, and that changed everything." As the dawn cycle began on the station, painting the observation port in shades of artificial sunrise, Vex thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the shadows of assassination to the light of family. From isolation to connection. From emptiness to love. It had started with one word from a child who needed her. Mama. Such a simple word, but it contained entire universes. It meant safety, love, protection, choice. It meant someone who would fight the galaxy to keep you safe. Someone who would change everything for you. Someone who would choose you always. Vex had been many things in her long life. Assassin, killer, shadow, death. But the title she wore with the most pride was the simplest one. Mama. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.